So we are back here, and it's my pleasure to welcome Kulbhushan Jain, who has had a long and wonderful career as an architect and conservation practice from really for a very long time. He's worked in the field of architectural preservation from 2007 to the present. He's been emeritus professor at the CEPT University in Ahmedabad. He's held various positions, including dean, faculty of doctoral studies, chairman of the Masters in Architecture program, etc. And I don't know if it's a claim to fame. He's taught around the world, in Italy, in Milan, and Ferrara, at MIT. I don't know if it's a claim to fame in particular, but for me, the fact that he worked and studied with Louis Kahn is very significant. And I wonder how that fits into our story. But it's a pleasure to introduce him now to speak about the complexities of conserving historic cities, which I think will follow on very closely from the last talk we had. Welcome, and thank you.
Thank you, Peter. And thank you for inviting me. I'm talking about complexities of conserving historic cities. So, with a little background, urbanism reached a very sophisticated level of evolution, both socially and physically, in northwestern part of the Indian subcontinent. This happened in the Indus River Valley, contemporary to two other great civilizations, the Mesopotamian civilization and the Egyptian civilization. The period between 3300 BCE and 1300 BCE is marked by development of city life, where living spaces and a high standard of infrastructure were the norm. In the Indus Valley, several settlements took shape. Full attention was paid to housing, streets, water supply, drainage, public baths, trading zones, and religious spaces. So this is the plan. The map shows this whole area, which was extensively developed as an urban settlements, and the Mohenjo-daro and Harappa, which are now part of Pakistan. Subsequently, recent excavations have shown several other settlements in this area. My case study is Jaisalmer, which is located here, and of course, this is the desert part. A deeper understanding of region started with initial explorations at Harappan site by Alexander Cunningham in 1872 CE, setting the pace for more comprehensive study by Dayanand Sahani in 1920 CE, who excavated more areas and systematically documented the town. Since then, several other towns, including Mohenjo-daro, Dholavira, Lothal, Rampur, and most recently Rakhigarhi, Farmana, and Kalibanga have been discovered in India. Gaggar-Hakra River, which supported the three settlements, joined the now dried up river South Saraswati, culminating in the run of Kutch. Conservation of these towns does not pose complex problems related to human habitation, because nobody lives there anymore. But there are questions about technical aspects of safeguarding these sites. In contrast, several historic cities of later periods continue to be inhabited and have very dynamic configurations. Preservation of their rich architecture and cultural attribute poses greater challenges as compared to the ruined cities of much earlier times. The needs of meeting the demands for growth and modernization are enormous. Attempts to freeze them in time fail because they are living organisms. In any case, they cannot be treated as museums. At the same time, meeting the new expectations of people destroys much of their cultural heritage value. Instead of positioning the context as conservation versus development, a philosophy of conservation and development needs to be examined. We have these examples from the Mohenjo-daro and Kalibanga. Conservation in ancient India. In India, the concept of restoring a decaying building or safeguarding an institution in order to extend its life dates back to ancient times. This practice, known as Jeernoddhar, on which you had a full presentation in first presentation today, so I'm not going to talk much about it, However, over a period of time, except for some Jain temples, the process lost its significance and much has vanished with the passage of time. A very significant aspect of Jeernoddhar of Jain temples is that of recognition of the need for restoration. The temple is totally and carefully dismantled piece by piece, element by element. Every piece is systematically coded and good ones are used in reconstruction. The deteriorated ones are discarded and new replacements are made from the same material procured from the original source. The structure after restoration looks exactly like the original structure. In the last 4 decades, much has changed in the field of conservation of heritage architecture in India. Archaeological Survey of India, founded in 1861 with Alexander Cunningham as the first Director General, has been carrying out the conservation of tangible heritage in the country. It was tasked to identify assets of national importance, declare protected monuments under the provisions of the Act, manage and guard such sites, document, research, and disseminate the knowledge so gathered, and explore new areas of archaeological significance. Recent years have seen a major change with many more properties and objects of cultural importance getting the attention of owners and conservation consultants. It's a major paradigm shift. This is a project by Ajankya Consultants in Nasik, where they are following the principles of Jeernoddhar and restoring a Shiva temple. Most parts of the temple have, most of the elements from the temple have been removed carefully. The inner core is exposed and they're going to reconstruct piece by piece. Few pieces at the bottom, at the lowest tier of the temple have been made new because they are totally deteriorated. Damaging invasions. As a consequence of territorial invasions, battles, and wars, a lot of damage was done to local cultures and their architecture. The world has seen big wars and their devastating outcomes. The first major invasion of India took place in 725 CE when Muhammad bin Qasim attacked the northwestern part of the country. The destruction of some very important religious structures also happened in the early 11th century when Muhammad Ghazni attacked India several times. In the year 1026 CE, on his last expedition, Ghazni destroyed one of the most important temples in India, the Somnath temple in southern part of Gujarat. Islamic invasions continued till the 16th century when Mughals started consolidating their territories again. During this period, the turmoil across the country led to a loss of traditional methods of restoration, and concept of Jeernoddhar started losing out to the temporal transformations. These are some images of the Somnath temple before, which has completely been restored. And we have images which show the destroyed temple and the restored one. Now, in terms of cities, Ahmedabad is the first World Heritage City in India. In 2017, the old city of Ahmedabad, which is this part, was declared World Heritage City by UNESCO. This generated a lot of enthusiasm in the people of the city and within the official system. Several measures were expected to be taken to safeguard its grand Islamic monuments, several temples, and above all, modest but architecturally rich housing. These areas with rich architecture are characterized by their various poles. A pole is a kind of micro neighborhood in which compact housing is organized around a small street, usually a dead-end street. These poles could originally be sealed off by closing its entry gate. In the urban fabric of Ahmedabad, the pole is a key housing element, compactly built with 2 to 3 storied structures with courtyards closely knit with narrow and winding streets. Street in the pole area, the public open spaces catering to various outdoor activities. Now, these are some old maps showing transformations. This is one of the earliest maps and how 2 new streets were added to this. And the central part, which was built by Ahmad Shah when he set up Ahmedabad. Some of the structures are fairly well preserved, but many suffer due to neglect and encroachments. The central complex in Ahmedabad consists of 4 major structures from when the city was founded. While the King's Tomb is in fairly good condition, the Queen's Tomb, which is Queen's Tomb, is in very bad shape. Both these structures are nationally protected by the Archaeological Survey of India, and encroachment continues to be the major problem. Heritage is seen as a commodity which can be commercialized or used as imagery, and unfortunately for creating fakes. The Ahmedabad airport has become a case in point. This is after the declaration of Ahmedabad as a World Heritage City by UNESCO. Now, a lot of things have been done at the airport. Next picture will show, but this is the famous Teen Darwaza, the 3 gates. And at the airport, a replica was created at the exit lounge. Now, it was considered, I think, a kind of respect to the idea of World Heritage, that every little thing started getting some kind of idea of heritage, even in the hoardings, in the police booth, or at the airport. Most interesting part of this arrival lounge at the Ahmedabad airport, which is subsequent to the declaration of World Heritage status, a lot has been done in the name of heritage, except, however, what actually needs to be done to safeguard the heritage. Images 1 and 2, these ones show the original step well at Adalat built in 1500 CE. And images 3 and 4 on the right show the step well created at the airport. Now, a little bit about the poles. The residential streets of Old Ahmedabad have proved to be extremely popular as small residential units. Each pole is generally occupied by families of a particular community. But these poles are the areas most seriously threatened by commercialization. Since the declaration of Ahmedabad as World Heritage City in 2017, Ahmedabad has lost hundreds of such pole houses. Basically, the wooden facades are removed and sold as important pieces which people buy to put in their new houses. Some more images of the pole areas and the quality of architecture, which you can see in the images at the bottom. Now, that's the main case study, which is Jaisalmer. Jaisalmer is unique in that it is located in the midst of the Thar Desert in northwestern India, and it happens to be on the east-west trade route. It is also unique in its built form as a city. A wide range of architecture, the urban and the vernacular, has coexisted for centuries in complete harmony. The houses on the peripheries with village-like character were used by families with rural backgrounds, and they used stone and mud to finish their houses. You know, like this is in the periphery of Jaisalmer. And they use stone and mud to finish their houses. The urban houses display sophistication of stone construction. The city was established in 1156 CE by Mahara ruler King Jaisalmer in 1153 to 1168. It is essentially an area, it's in the middle of the desert, and a hillock, triangular in shape, is where the fort is built. But this fort has about 400 houses along with the palace complex, and the rest of the city is built below. Gadisar Lake, situated on the southeastern corner of the city, was the main source of water. Water was carried in pitchers manually in the days when Jaisalmer was established. The northwestern edge, that is, of the lake, was built as a dam to hold water. This part also houses several pavilions, temples, and resting places for the travelers. The upper part of Jaisalmer has 4 wells also. The upper area, the fort, and the palaces are protected by very strong fortification with semicircular bastions interspersed by rectangular ones. The Jaisalmer fort continues to be a living fort, the only one in India. From the smallest to the largest, all houses, except the ones in bastions, use similar elements, structural systems, and building materials. The plans here, these plans show, the plans on same scale, show the scale variations. Courtyards are the most important feature in all these houses, where the quality of scale is maintained. Larger houses have 2 or even 3 courtyards. In larger Havelis, there are courtyards in the upper floors also. A typical street in Jaisalmer, the important part is that it is essentially one community. So the economic differences are accepted. So even a small house or a very large house is part of the same street, and it's more comfortable with the people than if it was a class divided situation. Until about 1970 CE, Jaisalmer was a quiet, sleepy town with a population of 17,000 people, underpopulated for its size and available housing. A few thousand pilgrims visited the town every year for its historic Jain temples. Back then, there wasn't a single hotel or guest room in all of Jaisalmer. The state government built the first tourist bungalow in 1973. Slowly but surely, visitors to the city started increasing. Residents, particularly in the fort, saw economic opportunity and started offering up their homes as cheap night stays. Sleeping spaces on a terrace used to be available for less than $1 a night. This led to the growth of both the residents as well as the visitor population. Several constraints followed, the worst of them being the increased consumption of water. In the absence of a proper drainage system, a lot of water started spilling over the slopes of the hill and seeping into the ground. Soft sedimentary carbonate rock, dolomite, could not handle it. This seepage of water created a lot of expansion and contraction in the soil, causing damages to the foundations of the fort and therefore to the superstructures. These images show some of the damages. You can see the pitching at the lowest level of the fort, of the hill collapsing, the seepage showing on the fort walls, and actually 2 bastions collapsed. So the ASI is reconstructed. It has already been reconstructed. Top 2 images show signboards and wall coverings. Lower 2 images show a bastion of the fort wall and inside, and how encroachment by a restaurant has totally changed the historic character. The 2 photographs at the top show rich and elaborately carved stone elements, which can be dismantled piece by piece and reassembled. The 2 photographs at the bottom show where the valuable facade elements have been removed and transported for reconstruction elsewhere. One part of the Ranika Mahal, Queen's Palace, was badly damaged in the earthquake of 1946. consisting of two parts, one built quite differently from the other. It is more solid looking one that suffered. The facades of the almost entire 4 floors and a major portion of the interior had collapsed in that earthquake. The fort at Jaisalmer, perched upon a hill, was visible from long distances. It made a beautiful view as visitors drove in front of from different directions. In 1985, when the integrated conservation plan was prepared, the periphery of the fort was all open, and it offered much visual delight. The plan was based on the premises of making the most of these amazing vistas and periphery. Even the outer city wall was left intact to a great extent. The plan was not officially accepted, and today a lot has been lost. This plan was commissioned by Intact New Delhi, and the lower 2 images show the image on the right shows the fort in 1970. A support from World Monument Fund, who had listed Jaisalmer as one of the most endangered 100 sites across the world, encouraged conservation of Ranika Mahal, the Queen's Palace. Intact New Delhi was the recipient of the grant. The work started in early 1990s and was completed in 2 years. Unfortunately, no plans or photographs of the collapsed building were available. One exterior photograph provided several clues, and despite imminent danger of further collapse, plans were prepared for the status of the building as it was at that time. King's Palace and the Queen's Palace, which did not collapse. This part did not collapse, except that this whole facade had separated from the floors up to about 20 centimeters. And this is the collapsed part. So in the conservation project, this was reconstructed, and this facade was kind of stitched back to the interior so that it doesn't shift further. This is the work going on the collapsed part of Ranika Mahal. So it is a total reconstruction, and several elements which were found were used. Otherwise, a lot of new material was used. Stonework and woodwork under progress for the restoration of Ranika Mahal. The kind of space which we call curved gallery provided a lot of clues for its original construction, and the right 2 images show that reconstruction. Ranika Mahal facade after conservation. This is closest to the picture that was available, and a small hall is made on the ground floor for the community. This is a kind of intervention where few walls were not reconstructed and a larger space was created. Another project which was funded by Jaisalmer in Jeopardy, a trust created in London for streetscape. Now, the major problem in Jaisalmer has been the absence of toilets. So they were using a lot of outer gallery area along the ramparts. The project decided to construct a toilet for each house. So here we can see a toilet constructed within the courtyard, on the external platform, within the courtyard, also in the external platform. The key issues, the most difficult aspect in the conservation of historic cities is involvement of several agencies. from local administration to departments of culture, building works, heritage management, etc., have important roles to play. This impinges upon policy and decision making. Historic cities are the densest part of any growing city. Over a period of time, they become denser and demand more buildings and more space. Changing demographic patterns and transformation of residential land use into commercial causes several disruptions to the fabric of the city. With increase in population, there is enormous growth in traffic and transportation to and through city historic areas. This not only leads to unmanageable congestion, but also demands for road widening. Absence of commitment from city managers is one of the major reasons for the neglect of urban heritage. Political will to safeguard historic urban areas is also missing. Non-government organizations, though active in spreading awareness, are not powerful enough to show results on ground. No rules, regulations, and guidelines are formulated, thus not providing tools for implementation. Since living historic cities cannot be frozen in time or treated as museums, it is imperative to plan for growth, also how people can upgrade their habitat. Instead of creating fake images by putting together incongruous temporal as well as spatial elements to celebrate heritage. Genuine conservation of sympathetic development will be of much greater value to the culture. Historic cities in India need special attention in order to halt their decay, as much as they need considered strategy for development. Several historic cities in the Western world have shown the way from which we can learn and adapt strategies to suit our conditions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We have some time for questions. Yes, please.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I appreciated it. Oh, can you hear me? Okay. My name is Kesha Fong. I teach at the University of Pennsylvania in Built Heritage Conservation. And your last sentence is this very tempting open door. And you mentioned that there are several cities in the Western world which provide great or useful examples for how this can be done well, given these kinds of challenges you've identified. And I'm curious, what are some of those examples?
Well, this, my own experience, I have a lot of experience in cities in Italy, for instance, and I've been involved with Ferrara University. The Ferrara city is also a World Heritage City. And the way they have managed, for instance, hoardings, signboards. And when I visit, I stay in a small hotel, which is a house converted into a small hotel on a street. The hotel signboard, to me, is amazing because it's 12 inches by 8 inches signboard in metal. And here, for one hotel in the dense area of the city, we will have 5 big boards. Most of the facade is covered. So, I mean, Italy to me is a fantastic example. But then, of course, in Germany, where a lot of my friends have worked. And one of my first experiences was in a small town called Munster. And it was amazing to see the work that they're doing. And the regulations are there. There is a conservation officer in the town. And so, I mean, I don't want to talk of Florence and Venice or other places, because maybe that's another level. But yes, in Europe, yes.
Do we have some other questions? I would follow up that same first question because you talked about sympathetic development in that last sentence of yours. And I wonder if you could unpack sympathetic for us?
What we found here, what was happening in Ahmedabad, it all connected with what they call the floor space index, in the sense of meaning that for a particular floor area, suppose you have 100 square meter land, if your floor space index is 3, you can build 300 square meters. Certain. Now that made people to buy a few houses, consolidate land, and put up structures of up to 10-story high. And those as apartment buildings, they were sold. One decision by the municipal corporation, which was, so several organizations in Ahmedabad were fighting for it. When they reduced it to 1.5, from 3 to 1.5, that means you can only build one and a half times of the ground area. And most of the people were enjoying the built up area, which was more than 1.5 times. So this whole process of demolishing apartments and constructing multi-level apartment buildings stopped. That the scenario. If there are houses with very, Ahmedabad houses, which were a major part in getting the World Heritage status, are elaborately wooden carved facades. But there are houses which are not so elaborate. The basic premise is that please maintain volumes, scale, and general character of streets, need not imitate facades, but basically the scale and volume. So that, to my mind, is because the development, people want to upgrade their houses. And I personally feel that, yes, they can.
So I think we have time for one question, and I'm gonna ask it because you, in your brief historical overview, you made the argument that the invasions in the Northwest by the various Muslim emperors over the course of the period 1000 to 1525, when the Mughals came, effectively undermined the principle of Jinodharna. And I'm wondering whether you think, thinking about the first two presentations today, whether you think efforts to employ that set of terms and concepts now are themselves a form of Disney.
I think one thing which is happening is the acceptance of the principle and the premise. There was a full presentation as the first presentation on Jinodhara. Jinodhara, which is a pronunciation from southern part of India. In northern part, it is Jinodhara. I gave one example. I did not elaborate it, but I gave an example on which a young couple is working in Nasik, this temple, and I think it is getting accepted. And conservation architect, this couple that I'm talking about is one young engineer and his wife, architect, and they're working on it, and more people are getting interested. So I think it works more through demonstration rather than just discussion. So people are working, and I think there is a possibility that it will be accepted more.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry to have to run, but we have to stay on our schedule. So I thank you so much for this really wonderful presentation. I wish you a very good evening. Thank you.
Thank you.